Hello, I'm JT Velikovsky, and this presentation is called Diagrams of Evolution in the book Elements of Evolutionary Culturology. This paper was inspired by a great workshop on diagrams of life and evolution convened by Natalie Gontier and AppEEL. And there's the website there for more information. And here's some information about my background, communication science basically, and author of the book Elements of Evolutionary Culturology. In this N-minute paper, inspired by that great workshop on diagrams of life and evolution, I'll present or cover some of the diagrams of evolution in this book, Elements of Evolutionary Culturology, including this diagram, this evolutionary diagram, this evolutionary diagram, this one of an evolutionary algorithm diagram, and this one, the Fractal Systems Metamodel of Biocultural Evolutionary Creativity, which again is a macro evolutionary algorithm. And there's 101 slides in this PowerPoint deck, which reminds me of an interview I did with David Sloan Wilson about his great novel Atlas Hugged, called 101 Questions About Atlas Hugged. But that's another story. And so there's also a webinar with Dean Keith Simonton, David Sloan Wilson and myself from 2021 on AppEEL's YouTube channel, a webinar in the 2021 series of AppEEL Webinars, which has more information about David's book and Dean's work on blind variation and selective retention. D.T. Campbell was Dean Keith Simonton's doctoral grandfather, so that's an interesting connection there in terms of evolutionary epistemology and creativity science. Next. And so a recommended article on diagrams is this one. I really like this article, Why a Diagram is Sometimes Worth 10,000 Words, from Cognitive Science Journal by Nobel Prize winner Herbert Simon and Jill Larkin. There's a couple of diagrams from that article or paper there. Terrific article showing the amount of data that you can and information you can communicate with a diagram as opposed to using simply words or tables. Next. And some more recommended articles include these two by Natalie from 2011, Depicting the Tree of Life, and from 2009, a PowerPoint deck, Different Trees, Different Evolutionary Theories. Those are on Natalie's academia webpage, highly recommended. And still more, these two articles by Natalie as well, Cosmological and Phenomenological Transitions of How Humans Conceptualize and Experience Time. Some great diagrams in there as well. And this one more recently, Hierarchies, Networks and Causality. Some diagrams there. All highly recommended. Anyway, so as I say, see the videos of that great workshop on diagrams of life and evolution. There's one of the video links there, and down the bottom a link to the AppEEL YouTube channel. Some of the diagrams that came up during that workshop were this one here, for example. This one, this interactive one here, and of course Haeckel's three great branches on the tree of life. As I say, highly recommend seeing that whole workshop on video on YouTube. And one great resource out of many that came out of that workshop for me was this interactive historical atlas of the disciplines, a great website with many examples of diagrams of the disciplines. Here, for example, is one of Compte's diagrams of the disciplines. So on the horizontal axis from left to right, we have the historical order that these disciplines emerged in. So mathematics first, later astronomy, later physics, chemistry, later biology, later sociology. And vertically, there are different qualities marked on the y-axis there, such as the level of complexity in each of those disciplines or domains of knowledge, and some other things on the y-axis too. At any rate, again, highly recommended. Next. Oh, and following on from Compte's hierarchy of the disciplines, a great chapter by Dean Keith Simonton from 2012 in a Handbook of Organizational Creativity is this one, showing a hierarchy of the sciences based on their objective characteristics of both the field, or the people and the researchers, and the domain, or the actual knowledge itself. So up top we have physics as one of the hardest sciences. Under that, chemistry, then biology, psychology, sociology, as the sciences become softer, partly due to complexity and due to the accuracy of observations. At any rate, that's an extension, or if you like, a mathematical proof using, or an evidence-based example of the hardness versus the softness of different disciplines of science, from physics to chemistry to biology, psychology, sociology. A great chapter from 2012. And likewise, here is a diagram from the book Elements of Evolutionary Culturology. This one likewise shows the emergence of disciplines from systems philosophy down the bottom to mathematics above that, then of course astronomy and geology, then physics and chemistry, biology, psychology, sociology, anthropology, and finally the arts and humanities. Going upwards shows emergence of systems in the universe, and all of the units in all these domains are fractal holon partons. You can see a little three-directional arrow there showing the three laws of fractal holon partons. At any rate, the idea of this is demonstrating how evolutionary culturology achieves the goal of consilience, the unity of knowledge, referenced in Ed Wilson's 1998 book, Consilience. So the sciences, social sciences, and the arts on the y-axis there, but they all share the same units of culture, being fractal holon partons. So resulting in consilience, the unity of knowledge, or convergence, or vertical integration of knowledge. Next. And so culture is composed of domains. There's a list of about 20 domains. There's about 50,000 domains at least in culture. And some domains, for example, language at the top there, extend through other domains, because in science, for example, people use a lot of language, and in many other domains, movies, televisions, video games, poetry, humor, religion, etc., music, visual art even, you will see language popping up, integrated into these other domains. And at any rate, on the left there, we have the structure of all domains in culture, due to the structure of the units of culture being fractal holon partons. And so you can be looking at a whole domain in culture there, or all domains in culture, and if you zoom into smaller scale levels, you still end up at a fractal whole-on parton. At any rate, so that's a diagram of units of culture and how they are structured, and both domains and the units of culture within those domains in culture are structured as fractal whole-on partons and all obey the 3 laws of fractal whole-on partons, which are the same 3 laws that govern biology, not just culture. Next. And so in case people aren't familiar with this naming system or nomenclature, fields, domains, and individuals from Simonton's 2012 chapter, that draws on Csikszentmihalyi's systems model of creativity, or evolutionary socio-cultural systems model of creativity from 1988. So we have 3 elements or 3 subsystems. We have a field of scholars or producers and consumers for a domain, and we have a domain in culture, whether it be science or music, language, fiction, novels, etc., whatever the domain might be, or all culture. And within the field we have an individual or a person or an agent, or could even be a smart system, an AI. At any rate, that just, if you're new to it, that just covers the domain, individual, field interaction system of creativity or cultural evolution from creativity science, dating to Csikszentmihalyi, 1988, and as used by Simonton here in this 2012 chapter on fields, domains, and individuals in science. And so what we're actually looking at there are systems and subsystems. So we have the domain as a system, all the knowledge as one system. An individual or a person is a biological and psychological and sociological system. And of course we have the field of individuals. But those 3 systems are in fact subsystems of a larger system. So we have the larger system on the outside containing 3 subsystems, and those are the 3 subsystems there: the domain subsystem, the individual or person or agent subsystem, and the field or the people, consumers and producers, or scholars, or even smart systems, AIs, any kind of agent that can be in the field for a domain in culture. So systems and subsystems. So systems science becomes important on this view from creativity science. And so one of the diagrams from Elements of EvCult is that a system is structured as a fractal whole-on parton. There again is that same model of the structure of culture and biology. And this particular image or mathematical object goes back to Leibniz, who first described it, of that particular model or theory or shape or geometrical pattern. So yes, a system is structured as a fractal whole-on parton. That's one of the diagrams from Elements of EvCult, the book. And importantly, both systems and units of culture, which are the tools used by those systems to achieve goals or to solve problems, both of those are structured as fractal whole-on partons. It's one of the discoveries of the science of evolutionary culturology. Yes, in summary, both systems and units of culture, also known as tools, are structured as fractal whole-on partons. So for example, language is a tool. It's a communication tool which solves problems of communication between systems. And for example, music is also a tool. It achieves goals or solves problems of emotional transportation or affect, or self-expression or entertainment or sonic enjoyment, etc. Next. And another diagram from Elements of EvCult, the three laws of fractal whole-on partons. So these units of culture or biology obey these three laws. They integrate upwards into the larger unit on the scale level above. They compete or cooperate sideways with units on the same scale level, and they also control and command downwards the smaller units which are inside them. So there's a diagram of three laws of cultural evolution and biological evolution and emergence. This is one of the reasons why larger units emerge from smaller units when they obey these three laws of fractal whole-on partons. Next. Yes, so we have the three laws: integrate, control and command, compete and cooperate. Next. Those are the three laws of fractal whole-on partons. Next. And yes, that, for example, it gives an example where you can see those three middle-sized circles are integrating upwards into the larger circle. They're also competing and or cooperating with each other for resources, say, if it's a system, or attention, if it's a unit of culture, and use. And they control and command the units which are inside them. So they give them structure. Next. So systems and subsystems, we have our domain, agent, field, interaction system there. So we have our three subsystems: the domain, individual or agent, and field subsystems that make up a system. But of course the individual is contained inside, or is a part of, the larger field, which is made up of individuals. So what we have are two self-coupled systems, a domain and a field, which is made of individuals. So that the outputs of one system, say the field, become the inputs of the domain, or the canonical knowledge, and the outputs of the domain become the inputs for the field. So these are two self-coupled systems, the domain and the field. And of course the field is made up of many individuals or agents when we zoom in a bit closer to see the detail, or the subsystems within that system of the field for a domain in culture. And here is another diagram of evolution from Elements of Evolutionary Culturology, showing those two self-coupled systems very simply. A field on the left in culture, which contains agents, or is a system made of agents, namely consumers and producers of that domain. And on the right, the other system is a domain in culture, whether it's science, music, novels, games, etc., which is composed of units of culture, ideas, processes, and products. So there we have two self-coupled systems, and that results in cultural evolution as the outputs of one become the inputs of the other, and as they become changed over time, these individual units, and the field and the domain as well. They also evolve or change. So that's another diagram of evolution from systems diagram from Elements of EvCult. And yes, we see there the field is made up of individuals or agents or persons, and also smart systems or AIs. in Computational Creativity. And then over in the domain, you have, for example, products such as books, and books contain ideas, and people go through a process of absorbing that information when they read that book. So there we have two self-coupled systems of a field in culture and a domain in culture. So back to Simonton's version of the domain agent field system. We have the field there, the domain there, and an individual in the field there. And we see some of the inputs and outputs. The individual or the agent samples information from the domain, whether they're reading a science book or listening to music or riding in a car, say. And then when they have new ideas, they communicate those to the rest of the field, which filters the creative versus the uncreative ideas, or the good from the bad, from the better, and the better ones are incorporated into the domain, and about 99% of new ideas are deselected by the field as a filtering system, a bit like the environment filters organisms in natural selection in the wild. And so again, that same systems model of creativity applies to all these disciplines or domains, and the units, as I say, are all fractal Holon partons, so that results in consilience, the unity of knowledge. And in summary, all domains in culture evolve or change, and those evolutionary diagrams explain some of the mechanisms as to how. So in a nutshell, what is evolutionary culturology? It's the meta science of the units, the scale levels, and three laws of fractal Holon partons. And so you can see those in that diagram there of a fractal Holon parton. There's the large unit and the smaller units contained within it on different scale levels, and they're all obeying the three laws: integrate upwards, compete, cooperate sideways, control and command smaller units inside them downwards. And so we have the units, scale levels, and three laws of units of culture and units of biology, and the evolutionary algorithms or mechanisms that are operating on these same units. And here's some examples of those evolutionary algorithms: selection and transmission. Another one is selection, variation, and transmission, which changes the unit in question. The blind variation and selective retention evolutionary algorithm, or evolutionary epistemology. The fractal systems Metamodel of biocultural evolutionary creativity, and the I iterates to P evolutionary algorithm, etc. Those are the main ones, though, by which biology and culture evolve. And then the question comes up, what is a meta science? A meta science is explained this way. Down the bottom of this diagram, we have individual sciences, so maths, geometry, physics, chemistry, astronomy, geology, biology, psychology, sociology, and anthropology. Those are all individual sciences, although they overlap as they emerge into different domains of units of study. So those are individual sciences. Above that, we have the meta sciences, for example, systems science, which applies to all of those individual sciences, because maths involves systems, and so do physics, because atoms are systems. Chemistry, well, molecules are systems. Astronomy, well, solar systems, galaxies and universes are systems. Geology, well, a planet is a system, for example, a biosphere of Earth. Biology is about systems because organisms are biological systems. Then psychology is about systems because somebody's mental information processing and emotions are a psychological system. Sociology involves groups which have people in them with psychologies, and anthropology looking at culture. There's that too. The subject matter is systems. So systems science is a meta-science. It applies to all those individual sciences. And other examples of meta-sciences are information science, which applies to all those individual sciences as well, because systems are made of energy, matter, and information. So every one of those disciplines has information in it, which can be studied, and information transfer or communication. Likewise, another meta-science is cultural evolution. So you can look at any of those domains and see how the units are evolving or changing over time. And of course, creativity science is another meta-science dating back to the 1950s with J.P. Guilford's speech to the APA. We can look at the emergence of new, useful and surprising units or creative units in any of those domains as well, in any of those individual sciences. So there we have individual sciences on the bottom, meta-sciences, the level above that, and then evolutionary culturology goes one level higher because it applies to all of the below, mainly as it reduces systems and units of culture to their simpler scientific structure, the fractal whole-on parton and its 3 laws, and the algorithms operating on them. So that explains what individual sciences, meta-sciences, and this new meta-meta-science is. As I say, EvCult applies to all of the below and simplifies them, which is why it's also called simplicity science as opposed to complexity science. It's a much simpler view or scientific world view or universe view, as the case may be. Next. And yes, EvCult applies not just to the meta-sciences but to the individual sciences as well. Just depends on what level of scale you care to examine the units, levels, laws and mechanisms. Next. And that reminds me of Dennett's quote of Doug Hofstadter. Anything you can do, I can do meta. I can do anything better than you. So yeah, good book by the way. And so the major scientific reduction of evolutionary culturology is to scientifically reduce systems and units of culture, which are the inputs and outputs and tools of systems, to their simpler structure, which is the fractal whole-on parton, so they can be studied more accurately and predicted and controlled, or scienced. And here is another great diagram of life and evolution, the Great Tree of Life by Eisenberg 2008. In this particular diagram, I like the design of it. Time moves outward from this central bottom point on the x-axis there. So that black line on the circumference would be the present, where all these species have survived to. Of course, leaving out all the 99% that went extinct. You can see some of the extinction events there on some of those radiuses. And so time begins at the origin at that central point there, the Earth's birth. At any rate, just another great infographic or diagram of evolution of life. And just a bit of theoretical background from the Newcastle School of Creativity at University of Newcastle, Australia, where I did my PhD. The Newcastle School draws heavily on Csikszentmihalyi's systems model of creativity and systems science, and Simonton's work in creativity science, such as that great book, Creativity in Science from 2004, and there's an example of a book by some scholars from the Newcastle School, educating for creativity within higher education. So that's just a bit of theoretical background there on systems science. And there's more information about the Newcastle School on my PhD weblog. And so what is the definition of culture in evolutionary culturology? Good question. There are over 300 definitions of culture, as this great book here demonstrated in 2006. Depending on your discipline and domain, they have different definitions of culture, but it's good for everyone to be on the same page. So the definition of culture in evolutionary culturology is information in the phase states of idea and or process and or product. Namely, culture is a tool for solving problems or achieving goals. So that's a definition of culture, which encapsulates all previous definitions of culture. And what's the definition of creativity in evolutionary culturology? A creative unit is a unit of culture, that is an idea or process or product, which are all fractal whole-on partons, that are judged new, useful and surprising by consensus of the field, who are the producers and consumers, for a domain in culture. And by the way, all creativity is problem solving. So this is using a Popperian view of all life is problem solving. And all science is problem solving. Next. So this is an excellent book, Darwin on Man, a psychological study of scientific creativity, by Howard Gruber from 1974. Interestingly, this illustration on the front cover is fractal because it contains a smaller version of itself inside itself, as if there's perhaps a little homunculus inside the brain. So that's a fractal image because it's self-similar on different size scales. And now, for example, that arrow is also fractal because it is self-similar on different size scales. It contains a smaller version of itself inside itself, i.e. fractal geometry. Next. And of course, that image, being a unit of culture, is also an example of a fractal whole-on parton. And we can see how whole-on partons are self-similar on different size scales. And so, looking at some of Darwin's early diagrams of evolution from his notebooks, here's one very simple version. Here's a slightly more complex one from Darwin's notebooks. Again, a slightly more famous one, I think, and he's drawn a branching structure there. And another tree diagram of Darwin's from 1868, showing man's hypothetical relationship to the other primates. And of course, the very famous diagram, the only diagram in The Origin of Species, 1859, demonstrating the origin of species, branching off there. And here's another diagram from the book Elements of Evolutionary Culturology. This is a tree of culture showing when different fields for different disciplines had their first international conference. So Similarly, using a tree metaphor, showing these disciplines branching off once they became a discrete field in Bourdieu's or Csikszentmihalyi's terms. Next. And of course, moving up, time moves up in that diagram. So right down the bottom we have the roots of science in philosophy back in Aristotle's day, 330 BCE. And moving upwards, the topmost branch on this particular one is the Cultural Evolution Society. We had our first conference, international conference, in 2017. But yes, going back down there, you can, moving back further in time on that trunk of the tree. In evolutionary culturology, all units are groups and all groups are units because of the structure of fractal holon partons. It's just a question of how closely you examine them or how far away they are. So a group will look like a single unit from a long distance away, but when you get up closer you can see the individuals that it is made of, and they too are groups when you zoom in closer. So the fractal holon parton being the structure of the units in both biology and culture, and governed by the 3 laws of fractal holon partons. But in a nutshell, all units are groups and all groups are units, whether it be cells, tissues, organs, organ systems, organisms, family groups, nations, etc. Or letters, words, sentences, articles, chapters, books, libraries, etc. Here's a diagram of the selection, variation, transmission evolutionary algorithm from EvCult. So if you have a population or pool of units in an ecosystem down the bottom there, or in an environment, we're selecting 2 of those units, combining or varying them, and transmitting the result back into the pool or the ecosystem. So evolution occurs in systems, namely ecosystems. And so there's a diagram of an evolutionary algorithm, namely the SVT, or Selection Variation Transmission evolutionary algorithm, which of course operates in both biology and culture. And pulling back a little, what is a system? Looking at systems science, there's a system. It has a boundary, an algorithm inside, or processor or processors inside it, and it has inputs and outputs, and it is contained inside a larger system called an ecosystem. So you can see how that's also fractal, because we have a system within a larger system, and it just depends which system is the object of inquiry. They're all ecosystems, no matter what the system. So that's a scientific model of a simple system. For anyone new to systems science, you have an object with a boundary, algorithm inside, or algorithms, inputs and outputs. Next. And here's another diagram from Elements of Evolutionary Culturology, showing a system of systems from the multiverse at the top, the largest in scale, down to strings at the bottom, very small in scale, and organisms, plants, animals, human animals, in the middle in terms of scale there. So yes, these are some of the units that are evolving. Next. This is a simple model of a fractal holon parton, whether in nature, so astronomy, geology, or in biology, or in culture. So we have the top view there and an exploded side view on the right, pulling out the smaller systems or units within. which are made up of smaller systems or units. Next. So this domain field agent system, which is an adaptation of Csikszentmihalyi's systems model of creativity from 1988, you have an agent up top, a field on the right of agents, a field of agents there, and a domain down the bottom. So the only thing is the field can only see what's in the domain once it's outside the agent's mind, once they've communicated it. So the top circle there, the big pink one with the agent, let that represent what's inside their mind. And so in the domain, if we have two units, the agent can select them. So they're inside their memory, so that's selection. Then they can vary them, say combining parts of units, and then transmit them back to the domain. And the field can now judge that new unit, and if they decide it's new, useful and surprising, or creative in other words, it will probably be retained as canon, selectively retained, or if it's not judged creative, new, useful and surprising, it will probably become archive or go extinct or be ignored. And so there's an example of selection, variation, transmission, evolutionary algorithm for how units of culture grow and change in a domain as it grows and changes. And that same concept is represented by this diagram in the book Elements of Evolutionary Culturology. So up top we have a domain with its subdomains because there's categories of canon. So there are classic units of culture or popular units of culture. There's critically acclaimed units of culture, and these are sometimes overlapping categories. And when you have uncreative units, they become archive in a domain of culture, whether it's science, music, mechanical inventions, etc. And down the bottom right, we have an agent, and in the bottom left, we have the field, including the gatekeepers, critics, amateurs, and the general public. And so this is a fractal version of the socio-cultural evolutionary systems model of creativity. So you might have a unit of culture that's classic in the domain, and an agent absorbs that unit, so it goes into their memory, then it can go into their imagination, and they may change it, for example, may alter the unit, and they may judge it, and if it's worth showing to the field, they'll communicate or present or transmit that to the field, who will judge it, and it will go out, spread out through the subsystems of the domain, and they may select it for inclusion into the canon in the domain, or it may go archive and be rejected or deselected or ignored. And so these are the units that move around these three systems, the domain, agent, field system. These are the units of culture, fractal holon partons, that's their structure. But more simply, they can just be represented as a unit like that, or they might be changed by an agent in the field. Next. And this is an animated diagram of the fractal systems metamodel of biocultural evolutionary creativity that I created in SketchUp. So we have the domain up top, the person in the bottom right, and the field in the bottom left of that diagram. And here's a more 3D version of the same model or diagram. So showing the domain, person or agent, and the field. And those little balls are units of culture that move around between these three systems or three subsystems. And here we see units of culture going from a memory to imagination, judgment, over to the field. and the field judges it, and in this case the unit is judged deselected as archive. Next one, new unit presented to the field, they're judging it, and it's also gone archive rather than canon in culture. And there's a classic unit of culture coming down into the memory of an agent in the field, and from there they can perhaps use their imagination to change it and present that to the field as an idea, process or product, and the field accordingly will judge it and select it as canon or archive in the domain. And here's more units of culture. So perhaps this agent is absorbing lots of information. Maybe they're reading lots of books and going to lots of lectures, etc., talking to other people in the domain and learning lots of information. So lots of units of culture going into their memory there, into the mind of the agent or person in the field. Another unit of culture going into their memory there. And so that gives a sense of how units of culture in the domain are absorbed by an agent in the field, and if they are creative, they might change it to be more new, useful and surprising. More units of culture from the canon going into the agent's memory there. And another unit of culture, and another. At any rate, that gives you lots of information. They're learning at a very fast rate there. Interesting. Lots of units of culture going into this agent's memory. So, the domain, person, field, interaction, and memory, imagination, judgment interaction systems, and 7 categories of canon and 1 category of archive in a domain in culture. Next. And there's a YouTube movie of that and a few other movies online. And so interestingly, the very creative scientist Charles Darwin did the selection, variation, transmission, evolutionary algorithm. So selection of units, variation or change of the units, and then transmitting these new ideas, processes and products back to the field, into the domain. As an example, in the domain, there are, in the environment that people live in, there are a lot of trees. No doubt Darwin was very aware of trees, and also he was aware of his grandfather's work on evolution. So a tree there in the mind of Charles Darwin as an agent, and he's selected that idea, then he's varied it by doing that very simple diagram of evolution, of species branching off, and he's then transmitted that to the domain because we have it in his notebooks. So that's one example of Darwin doing selection, variation, transmission, evolutionary algorithm. And then of course he's taken that diagram and varied it a bit further by making it a bit more complex. And that's also been transmitted to the field, and it's in the domain in his notebooks. And of course this pattern continues, and there's one of his more famous diagrams, tree diagrams of evolution from Origin of Species, 1859. So that's just an example of Darwin doing the selection, variation, transmission, evolutionary algorithm on units of culture. Likewise, creativity scientist Mihai Csikszentmihalyi did the selection, variation, transmission, evolutionary algorithm. He took Darwin's model or theory of culture. So up the top there, this is a representation of that. Up top, there's the species. On the bottom right, there's organism. Bottom left is the environment, which is like the field. It does the selecting and deselecting of the units. And so Csikszentmihalyi has taken that model, or scientific theory of biological evolution, from Charles Darwin, and he has varied it to apply it to culture. So up the top we have the domain for a domain in culture, whether it's science, music, arts, etc. And down the bottom we have the person or agent in the bottom right, and bottom left we have the field. And so he's selected, varied and transmitted Darwin's systems model of creativity in ecosystems. So that was a great act of creativity, transferring that model from biological evolution to socio-cultural evolution. And I have a blog post on my PhD blog about the evolution of Darwin's tree diagrams down the bottom there. And so again, Csikszentmihalyi doing SVT is he's taken Darwin's model of biological evolution, or the origin of species, and he's selected that, varied it so that it becomes applied to culture rather than biology. So there's a variation on that same model, and that's what he's transmitted to the rest of us in the field as the systems model of creativity in culture. And I have a blog post on the evolution of the systems model of creativity by Csikszentmihalyi, as he selected, varied and transmitted his model over time to different versions or variations of the same model of cultural evolution and creativity. So this is his earliest version of the model, the systems model, or the evolutionary socio-cultural systems model of creativity, from 1988, a very famous article. Top left is the field, top right is the domain, down the bottom is the person. So there's a slightly different perspective on the same model. And that article is in this great book, The Systems Model of Creativity, Collected Works of Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, from 2014. So that was the original model of cultural evolution that Csikszentmihalyi did in 88. Later he did this version, so we have domain up top, individual bottom right, field bottom left. And so this is another version Csikszentmihalyi selected, varied and transmitted to us all. And another one in the Wiley Handbook of Genius, edited by Dean Keith Simonton, 2014. So we've got culture and the domain up top, the individuals down the bottom right, and the field bottom left. So those three subsystems in the systems model of creativity, or evolutionary socio-cultural systems model of creativity from Csikszentmihalyi. And in 2018, Csikszentmihalyi and D.T. Gruner varied the model like this, adding in artificial intelligence, mainly because of computational creativity. So AI's absorbing units from the domain and changing them and contributing them and to the domain. So that's an interesting variation on the model. And what is computational creativity? In case you haven't heard of it, here's an example of an AI doing artistic computational creativity using the software called Crayon. So you put in a prompt such as Charles Darwin in the style of Van Gogh, and you get 9 examples where the computer has combined those ideas. There's Darwin in the style of Vincent van Gogh, or Darwin in the style of Gustav Klimt. The top left one's the most interesting one. Or Charles Darwin in the style of Mandelbrot. fractals. And here's Fractal Charles Darwin. Not particularly good at faces, crayon. Charles Darwin is a phylogenetic tree diagram. Anyway, try it yourself. Go to the website, crayon. There's Popper as a phylogenetic tree diagram. Yeah, as I say, it's not so great with faces, but anyway, interesting. So that's just one example of computational creativity using crayon. Here's an example of computational creativity that I made as an extension of my PhD work. It's a artificial writer program, so it combines old movie ideas into get new, useful and surprising movie ideas. It's called the Robo Raconteur. So it's an Excel spreadsheet that you can download, and it will combine movie ideas to get new movie ideas. So using blind variation and selective retention. And it also is a transmedia story generator and an ironic character generator, and it also has an artificial critic in it to judge the attention-getting evolutionary psychology content of a new movie concept or log line. At any rate, so it has about 6 different functions in it. It's just an Excel spreadsheet, so it's easy to see how the creativity algorithms are working underneath it. Anyway, there's a blog post and a journal article on that if anyone's interested in computational creativity, which of course creativity being the same phenomenon in both biological and cultural evolution, the emergence of new useful and surprising units on any scale level, or new and adaptive, or new and appropriate, or new and effective and surprising units. Anyway, that's an example of computational creativity. And so, as I say, Csikszentmihalyi did the selection, variation, transmission evolutionary algorithm on the systems model of creativity itself, which is a bit meta. So, highly recommend that book. And get ready for a shock or a surprise. Campbell, Popper and Simonton is the same as Csikszentmihalyi, meaning evolutionary epistemology. For example, D.T. Campbell's article in that 1974 book, The Philosophy of Karl Popper, edited by Schilp. That is, in fact, the identical model as the systems model of creativity from Csikszentmihalyi. So very interesting for evolutionary epistemology scholars who may not be aware of the work in creativity science on evolutionary epistemology. Next. And so again, yeah, each domain works the same way with this Metamodel, this macro scale evolutionary algorithm, which contains within it the BVSR, the ST, SVT, I iterates to P, all those other evolutionary algorithms are contained within this model when you zoom in closer to see what's happening to the units on different scale levels. Next. Yes, and this model is fractal because it takes the evolutionary sociocultural systems model of creativity from Csikszentmihalyi and notes that the same model of a domain, agent and field is contained within the mind of the agent, namely a memory, imagination and judgment system or subsystem within the larger system. So that is why it's fractal or self-similar on different size scales. So that's why it's called the Fractal Systems Metamodel of Biocultural Evolutionary Creativity. Anyway, that's explained in the book. And here is another evolutionary algorithm, creative practice theory. So we have a person and they have a history. They generate habitus or a feel for the game and accumulate economic capital, and they absorb the domain and navigate the field, so they internalize that domain of knowledge. They develop social, cultural capital as well as economic. They may create a creative unit of culture, and they may then get symbolic capital. So this model is a combination of Csikszentmihalyi's and Bourdieu's models of socio-culture. So that's 12 different steps of creative practice theory, how people do their creativity. That's an animated diagram of it, but in the book it just comes out as this simple non-animated diagram. And as an aside, agent-based models can be viewed as animated diagrams of evolution. So for my PhD, I did an agent-based model of the global feature film industry as a system, using creative practice theory as one of the underlying algorithms. And so there's more about this on my PhD blog, but this using NetLogo, I adapted another model from Welikovsky, and so these objects are screenwriters, bad screenplays and good screenplays within the systems, and these other icons in the diagram are film producers, so all members of the field of film or cinema. And then we have this icon for bad movies, and a producer usually makes 9 bad movies before they make a good one. Same for screenwriters, they usually write 9 bad screenplays before they write a creative one. And so this is the agent-based model of the global film industry, modeled as a system containing all those social networks, etc., and showing the rate at which new movies emerge from the system. And about 1% become canon, and the other 99% go archive. There's around 500,000 movies in existence. Anyway, there's more about this in my PhD, and this was an extension of the suggestions for further research. So at any rate, that can be viewed as an animated diagram of evolution, because we see how the domain of cinema evolves or changes over time, including the growth of that domain and the change of units within it. And here's a good recent book on agent-based models, or they're also called individual-based models. It just depends on the discipline. They have a different naming system, but it means the same thing. A good book came out recently on individual-based models of cultural evolution. And again, these could be viewed as animated diagrams of evolution when they're running and you freeze a frame. And I can recommend Mason Youngblood's website. He's a great cultural evolution scholar doing great work. Here's a model of bibliometric analysis of the field of cultural evolution, showing the most highly cited authors and how their work connects to each other through various networks. So that's a great model of a field there. And he also has an interactive phylogenetic tree of the evolution of electronic music. So it's a sideways tree, this one, showing how different genres emerge and change over time. So again, that's an excellent interactive diagram of cultural evolution. Worth visiting his website and having a play with those. as I say, it's kind of a sideways phylogenetic tree with time going increasing along to the right on the x-axis. And net logo agent-based models can be viewed as animated diagrams of evolution as well. So this is viewing agent-based models as animated diagrams of evolution, namely they contain systems and units of culture undergoing evolutionary algorithms. And you can try these yourself online at that website. So click on Net Logo Web on the left there, and you'll be able to skim through these different agent-based models. There's a traffic one, team assembly as a growing system, and the spread of viruses through populations, another animated diagram of evolution, other models of soil erosion, for example, seeing how a landscape changes over time, and ant colonies, seeing how they grow and change. So you can just go through these models quickly and press the setup and go button. There's a model of gas in a box, and a model of cooperation, and of course the three laws of fractal holon partons. The second one is compete or cooperate, which applies to all units of biology and culture. And again, this is my model of the global film industry as a system. Again, all animated diagrams of evolution showing change over time. So those are worth a look. And EvCult is a synthesis of 7 other meta-sciences, including systems science, of course. And there's further reading on systems science on the Evolutionary Culturology weblog. So these are just some examples of different books, articles, and references on systems science on the EvCult blog there. Worth a read if you're not familiar with systems science. And so this is a fractal systems metamodel of cultural evolution. And as for the Tree of Culture, this is a table showing the year of the first international conference for various disciplines or domains in culture. And so this is how it looks when graphed as an evolutionary tree. So down the bottom we have philosophy in 300 BCE. Moving up, in 1665 was first published the Philosophical Transactions of the Royal Society, one of the first scientific journals. And most recently, Cultural Evolution Society in 2017 had its first international conference. And so this diagram showing the 3 laws of fractal holon partons from the book. Law number 1, integrate upwards. Law 3, control and command the units inside, and compete and cooperate with other units on the same scale level sideways. So these are the causes of multi-level selection in evolution, and how units grow in the domains of biology and culture. And you can use the three laws as a tool to identify units of culture in any domain. So the three laws can be used as a tool to zoom in to different scale levels of the units of culture. So you can use it as a tool to identify units of culture. And this next segment is a short excerpt from a longer video on that YouTube channel below. I zoom in on a fractal hole-on parton. This one's in culture, but there's also one for biology on that longer video. So this just shows zooming into different size or scale levels of the fractal hole-on parton. And so again, all those units are contained within this larger fractal systems metamodel. So there's only two things: systems and units of culture, the latter which are the inputs and outputs of systems, and also the tools of systems for achieving goals or solving problems. And so that diagram contains a lot of information in showing evolutionary algorithms operating on units of culture in any domain. And so the fractal hole-on parton is the structure of culture, which includes the structure of all stories, because stories or narratives are naremes, units of culture. So the same units, levels, laws, and evolutionary mechanisms apply to stories or units of narrative. And I like this quote from Kim Stanley Robinson's 1984 book, The Novels of Philip K. Dick. This was a version of Kim Stanley Robinson's great PhD thesis on Philip K. Dick's novels. I like that middle quote there in bold, where Robinson says, "All genres are mutable. They are born when writers transform and combine conventions from earlier genres." So this is selection, variation, transmission. They change as writers adapt their conventions to particular needs. Again, selection, variation, transmission. And they die when writers find them no longer useful and readers find them no longer interesting. So that's when different genres in literature go from canon in culture to archive or extinct. At any rate, highly recommend that book, and indeed most of Philip K. Dick's work as well. And that is the end of this N-minute paper. Thank you very much for listening. It was inspired by AppEEL's great workshop on diagrams of life and evolution. And it covered these diagrams from the book Elements of Evolutionary Culturology. And thanks again for listening. And once again, do take a look at those YouTube videos of those great sessions from the workshop on diagrams of life and evolution on AppEEL's YouTube channel. Thanks again and goodbye for now.